Welcome to Healing Wounds from the Past.
So Julia, in today's dialogue of exploration, I'd like to dive into your 37 years of working with people and investigate wounds from the past and how they affect people. And I suppose the first question would be, how do people recognise they have wounds?
How do people recognise they have wounds? I think essentially it is that they feel unhappy, that things aren't working out. Particularly, I think if life repeatedly seems to have patterns that are negative, that patterns in relationship, in their circumstances, in trying to achieve something and it eluding them, and when there's a repeated amount of disappointment, I think that that's a place people might recognise that there's something within them that may be preventing them getting what they want, but also it can be a big crisis in their lives.
That's interesting. Big crises and patterns. So once people recognise they have either of those or what's going on, what can they do about them?
Well, the interesting thing is that they might not recognise that it is a wound from the past that is causing the repeated pattern or the crisis, or even if we might not say that the wounds cause the crisis, we might not, they might not actually think there's anything from their past that is affecting the present. So actually, generally people might go for help. So it would be when they went for help that generally a therapist or whomever they went to would start to look at their past, I think.
Okay, so it's that acknowledgement that drives them to go for help, that allows them to say, there's something going on in my life that I'm not happy with.
Yeah, definitely, because often people actually don't recognise there are wounds because they might repeat patterns of, disappointment, not achieving, patterns in relationship, even things that do come to big crises. They might repeat that, some people might repeat that for a lifetime and not actually see that there was anything from the past that was affecting their present. So it's more that if people go and seek help, that generally that might be alerted, or they would be alerted to it. There's also, of course, nowadays more awareness of that. So they might read books, they might read an article, they might talk to somebody else who's had some help. So I think that generally people will be alerted to it from from somebody else, another source.
I'm interested in the patterns, actually. So people in relationship might always have a similar pattern. Boy meets girl, girl meets boy. They go through this whole thing and the same thing seems to happen over and over again. That's your idea of, that's what you're describing as a pattern.
Yes, this is, I think relationships are a place, particularly nowadays, where people tend to have more than one relationship because, in the past, people would often engage in marriage and it would last a long time. Now, there would be patterns in that marriage if people cared to identify and look at them that might be causing disappointment and sadness. And that can still happen, of course, in relationships. But it often happens in different relationships that the same thing happens. And that's a place where people can generally often really see a pattern. So it can happen in a long-term relationship where people have repeated patterns of negative occurrences that would alert them to something that is really disappointing. Or boy meets girl, they have a whole series of events that occur that mean the relationship ultimately ends, then it happens again, then it happens again, then it happens again, and that can bring people to an awareness.
But it doesn't have to be in relationship. With regards to relating to another, it can be in relationship with money, it can be in a relationship with what we're doing for work.
Yeah, it can be anywhere. Patterns occur in so many areas. It can occur in sport, where people repeatedly just about get to the big event and get injured or ill before it. It can happen that they might, always just stop short of success in a job, or they might have patterns in relationship at work where they will always come up against the director. They might always have somebody at their workplace who is the person who puts them down. I mean, there are so many areas where the patterns show themselves, or people repeatedly make money and lose it, or can never make money, or they will find that the path they really want and it just eludes them. I mean, it's endless. These are the negative patterns. There's clearly patterns of success, but as we're talking about the wounds, it's more the patterns where there is disappointment, sadness, frustration, loss, endings, repeatedly happening, which eventually wear people down, actually.
Of course, of course. So, having realised that there are patterns in our lives that aren't working for us, what can we do about them?
Well, there are a number of things, really. The first step is to notice. Once you notice that something isn't working, once you notice that there is a pattern repeating, then it's absolutely taking responsibility for the fact that you are the person, that you are the centre of your own universe, actually, and that this pattern is to do with you, that at levels there will be an invitation for the thing to repeat. Now, that isn't to say it's our fault or your fault or any of those things, but there will be something that has occurred. I kind of see life as a spiral staircase, that ideally we should be getting, our expression should be becoming more and more expansive, and we should be fulfilling our potential and being all that we can be, and the kind of magnificent human beings that we all have the potential to be. But if we have wounds from the past that occur in those early years, those early childhood years, which we all have, then as the staircase gets more and bigger, spiralier, then the glitches show up in greater and greater degrees. And that can be the time when we say, right, I have something here. So it's recognising that we are the common denominator in this pattern, or these patterns.
Okay, I understand that. So if I recognise, okay, I'm in a pattern and this obviously keeps on happening to me, I want to free myself, I absolutely acknowledge that I'm going in these circles and I might be going up and then, like snakes and ladders, coming right back down to square one again. What can I do to prevent that from happening again and again and again?
As you said, once it's identified that there is a pattern, so once you've identified the pattern, then at least there has to be a real consciousness as you go into it again. Now, that may not be evident to you till you've done it again, to be quite honest. With consciousness often comes the need to do the whole thing all over again, and then to see, oh my goodness, I've done that again. Now, within that, there is going to be more and more subtle ways of knowing you're in the pattern, because there will inevitably be relationships. It will inevitably be a relationship with a boss, a relationship with, somebody who you're intimately involved with, a relationship with your child, your parents. It will be Christmas time, it will be holiday time, there will be events. Often there is actual, external things that are the same. Then there will be you within that pattern. And if it's going to be something that's spiralling down to a place, as you say, the snakes and ladders going down again, there will be times which alert you, which when there is a reactivity within you, that there will be stress, tension, alarm bells at some level ringing within your body. So it's starting to really take notice of your body, actually, every day of your life, because the patterns are going to be occurring. They might be occurring in your marriage. They might be, so that might be a small thing that's happening, weekly, daily in your relationship. It might be that it's a big one that sets off, like, for instance, a sporting one, and I talk about sport because obviously I was a sports person, or am a sports person, and a pattern I had was that I would train really hard for an event, and this didn't happen all the time because I did actually get to the start line of events, but particularly marathons were an area that was difficult for me. And I got to less marathons, actually I didn't get to the start line. If I got to the start line I was always fine, but I often didn't get to the start line due to this pattern where I feared failure and I feared success actually, but that can be a confusing combination. But I would train really hard, and there would be a point at which I did that extra training session that was just one too many. And I knew, because there would be a feeling in my body, I would be getting tired, I would feel stress, tension before the training session, I would feel a disappointment with the results even though they were faster. There was this knowing inside my body, and I repeated that pattern many times even when I had the awareness that it was there. And the way I unravelled that was I had to go right back to where I first internalised that running performances were of great importance to me, to know I was loved, to know I was valued, to know I was seen, recognised. So the patterns will stem right back to the wounds from our childhood.
Absolutely. Now you said a whole bunch of interesting things there.
I said probably a lot, didn't I?
I think if we go back to one of the things that is of interest to me is you said about staying in the body. Now what interests me about that is that the mind and our emotions can be in the past, in the future, they can be all over the place, but actually the body can only be now, can't it?
Yes, the body can only be now, and everything happens in the body. So the body is incorruptible, really. It stores up all our wounds of childhood. It will keep them there, and eventually we can kind of, dupe it in terms of, denying it. We can cover it up with taking medication or alcohol or just carrying on, pushing ourselves. But actually the body presents its bill in subtle ways. But if we don't listen, often chronic fatigues occur and illnesses and disease. And as I say, I'm very will emphasise that nothing's our fault, but it is worth starting to really listen to the body, because the body will tell us in any moment, in any given moment, whether we are reacting to something. And if we have a reactivity in the body, it's often reminding us, because it's the old brain, the fight and flight, freeze, surrender, it's often reminding us danger, danger of something in the past. So if our body is reacting, then we must take notice, because it will be alerting us to a wound. It will be alerting us to a place where we're not now in the present. It will be alerting us to the fact that up to 90% of us can be in the past, where we first internalised that something wasn't safe.
It's very, very interesting to me, that reaction. So if a reaction comes up within the body for an event that happens outside us, actually it has nothing to do with the event outside us. That's just a trigger for something that's already going on within us, is that?
Well, yes, it's an interesting one, because clearly there can be clean emotion, immediate anger and immediate fear, or to something that is actually happening. Of course, that can be a very clean thing in the present, where we have to look after ourselves or somebody else, or respond to a situation. But actually rarely is there absolutely clean emotion, because all of us, if we haven't worked to heal the wounds from the past, will have something from the past colouring it, which means that the event that's happening we will be looking at through a filter of past experience. So for instance, when we were little, those first 7 years are so key in childhood development, and if we relied on our caretakers to look after us, and if at any time we felt unsafe in a situation, if we felt that to survive and stay in the care of our parents, that something that we were doing was going to mean that was threatened, we would react at the time by adapting our behaviour. So we might feel that if we were, too noisy, then we weren't going to be embraced by our family, so we learnt to be quiet. Now, of course, that, if it's unhealed, we go through our life, not speaking out can be the cause of creating some of the negative patterns.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, I understand that, but if a reaction happens that isn't clean, there must be a different sensation to that maybe than a clean one?
Yeah, the thing with this work, because this is the essence of being conscious and being able to be present to everything in relationship with everybody, it takes practice. So the first step is to start listening to your body every day. It's to checking in, where am I holding tension, how am I moving, how am I breathing, and starting to actually do body checks, because people often aren't in touch with their body. They're not listening to their body, and those little tiny reactivities, if somebody pushes in front of you in a queue, or somebody is a bit dismissive when you're buying something in the shop, even those interactions, you can feel a slight feeling of constricting in the throat or in the heart or in the stomach. I think a lot of people are familiar with the gut tightening, but it's, somebody is at work, for instance, and their boss is in a grumpy mood. Now that might remind somebody of their grumpy father, and the constricting feeling in the stomach can set off a whole pattern of events that need to have happened in the present.
That's very, very interesting. So, with that example, is there anything we can do in that moment when that constriction happens to prevent all the past coming into the present?
Yeah, we can. As I say, this is a kind of process that, as we said at the beginning, the first stage with this is to notice that we're unhappy, to notice that things aren't working out, to notice that we are engaging in patterns, whether it's in a cyclical place with our partner, whether it's different relationships, whether it's at work. We first need to notice the patterns are occurring. So that's the first stage. Then we might start at the same time, alongside that, having a consciousness that this will be coming from the child within us, that we got hurt, we needed to stay safe when we were little. So to stay safe, we often adapted our behaviour to make sure that we survived, and it was as big as that as a child. What then happens is, through life, we will have engaged in adaptive behaviours which we're not even conscious of. So therefore, then something like the example I said with the being at work, boss comes in, grumpy mood, our tummy constricts because it reminds us of our dad when he was grumpy. What we used to do as a child was maybe we either went to our room, or we tried really hard to please, or we acted out. Now, what can often happen is the pattern that we're seeing at work we might go, oh, I get it. Because when the grumpy boss comes in, what we might do is go, ooh, better keep quiet, out of the way. So we don't speak out, we don't say anything, which means that a pattern can occur that we're not noticed, we don't get promotion, or we basically have an unhappy time at work, we leave jobs because we keep getting grumpy bosses. So, it's a long answer to your question. We have to start noticing. So if we feel a constriction in our tummy, what we'll then know is this means that we are not in the present, that 90% of us is probably back in our childhood with our grumpy dad. Therefore, we are not going to act in the present. We're not going to be an adult. We're going to be in child. So we need to press pause and wait till the feeling leaves our tummy. Now, this can again take practice. To clear the tension from our body, it can take a sort of softening and a letting go. Some people like to think of dissolving that emotion. Some people like to feel about breathing it out. Some people just would like to wait. and you wait, or you breathe it out, or it dissolves. Once it's left your body, you are in a far better position to respond in the present, because you won't be looking through the filter of the pain, the wound from the past. You won't be looking at your boss and seeing your grumpy dad and therefore thinking, danger, 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 I have to do something because I'm not going to survive. You will relax, the tension leaves the body, you act in the present from the adult. You know your boss probably needs a little bit of time, a cup of tea, that he's just a guy who, or she's just a woman who you are engaging with, and you will both act in an adult form. And it actually is miraculous. Once you start to be able to put this into practice, it's one of the ways to really start to, from the inside out, heal these childhood wounds.
Heal these childhood wounds because they're no longer supported? You're not acting them out again, is that what you mean?
Well, when we're little and we get wounded because somebody can't answer our needs in that moment, they're too busy, or their own wounds mean that they crush us or hurt us, don't hear us. When that happens, were we healed at the time? So if we felt great fear or we felt upset, if somebody at that point helped us, told us we were okay, reassured us, then the stress would leave our body then. We wouldn't have got wounded. As that didn't happen, if we're able to stop, suspend time, past, present, future, they don't actually exist. Time is something we've created. So if we're able to suspend time and press the pause button and stop the attachment to the story of, I've got grumpy boss as my story obviously, but there are many other scenarios. If we're able to not project onto that, not create a narrative and a story, just suspend time, we can go into the unconscious and we can heal that wound as if it were the first time. We can go to the place where the child was hurt, time is suspended, and that wound can heal.
And that can be done by just simply being with the reaction rather than reacting on the reaction.
Yes, it can be being with the reaction in the body, allowing it to leave the body. We then have the space to respond differently, so we create a different narrative, and we then can build up a whole new way of being.
Right. And it's very interesting to me when you talk about not attaching a story to any given situation. So to use the example, if you've got a grumpy boss, the story behind that can be, my dad, this, that and the other, but actually the truth of the matter is completely different in that moment.
Yes, we tend to attach stories in the present that are informed from our past. So we will know things which actually we don't know. So if we've got the person coming in to work who is grumpy, and we have the narrative that we're in trouble, it's our fault, we've done something wrong, they don't like us, they're cross with us, this narrative will be informed from the past. So if we suspend the narrative and we don't take it personally actually, and we are able to clear the reactive feeling from the body, then there'll be a completely different way that we see the situation. We can be in the present with it, we can be in the now. We don't know that our boss is angry with us, that we're not good enough, we've done a bad job, we're no good. All of the things that unfortunately come from the child that's hurt. We can instead engage in a dialogue in the present. We can be intentional about hearing what is actually going on for the person in front of us, and we can heal in that interaction. And actually so can our boss, because we're all in this together. We're all in dialogue and we're all in relationship, and we all need to heal.
Actually, that's something that fascinates me. If I'm in a situation where I'm projecting on my boss because I think he's angry, there is this whole relationship with my wound being supported probably by my boss's wound, and vice versa.
Yeah, we do tend to engage, you know, with one another. We tend to unconsciously get attracted to people who have similar wounds, to be honest. That the unconscious drives most of our direction in relationship, and whether that's the people we work with, the people we play with, the people we have intimate relationships and romantic relationships, we will tend to unconsciously gravitate towards people with similar wounding. We might have complementary adaptations, and that means that, you know, if we weren't heard as a child and we adapted by being quiet, which wasn't my adaptation, then we might get attracted to someone else who was crushed in childhood and wasn't heard, but their adaptation might be to talk a lot. And these ways of being can at first be quite attractive, and you know, it's good to have someone speaking out and someone being listening, but over time these things can come up and create patterns, cause a pattern in relationship where somebody gets, you know, fed up with somebody never speaking, fed up with somebody always talking, and you know, the whole thing can occur that's still from childhood. So it's, yes, and that can happen in with colleagues, with boss and the person who's working for them. It happens everywhere.
Of course. And being in relationship is really bringing our reactiveness and our past wounds to the fore, isn't it?
Yeah, without question. I mean, we are always in relationship with everybody we meet, whether that is the person who we buy our paper from, or our morning croissants, or the person we're having a romantic relationship with, our children, our parents. We're always in relationship, and the reactivity will occur more the more intimate relationship, actually. I think the more intimate, the more opportunity for growth, the more possibility of you know, the patterns arising, our wounds showing, and yeah, everywhere we go, we have the opportunity to heal our childhood wounds.
And heal them just by not reacting to them and just being aware of them in the body and allowing them to naturally pass.
Yes, in effect, yes, in effect, it's probably probably more complex in relationship, in that both people are engaging. I mean, we can do this, yes, we can do this on our own. So every day, being conscious of our reactivity, being conscious that that has alerted us to something from the past. And with vigilance, we can transform relationships on our own. We can transform how we are in relationship. If we're doing it in relationship with our partner or our best friend or our, you know, colleagues, then there are lots of ways of being in dialogue together, where we truly listen to the other, truly validate their experience, and that can be healing in itself, because a lot of our childhood wounds come from not being heard, really, not being not being held, not being heard. So I think that it's an ever deepening process that we can engage in first and foremost on our own, but the more we are entering into every relationship we're in consciously, and the other is also entering in consciously, then the most incredible things can happen, and we can heal interaction by interaction.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's very interesting to me to see, or to monitor on a very, very moment by moment basis, reactions that are possibly happening within my body in any given circumstance. I might be walking down the street and someone might toot their horn, for example. So I think my question to that is, I mean, how do people start with this?
How do people start? I think it's that it is with a real commitment to taking notice. It's taking notice 24/7, obviously, ideally, starting to actually know that it's about us, that we can make a difference in our own life, that people think that the world is, as it is, but actually the world is as we are. So by deeply exploring, first and foremost, obviously, our paradigm, where that is all the, the circumstances of our birth, all the beliefs, all the social influences, the cultural influences, the events, the things that happen, the beliefs and value systems that were put into us. That's obviously informing who we are. But it's also our our reactions to things, the meaning we attach to all of those things, that's a kind of place of exploration. So starting to really get curious about our beginnings, our early years, our social construction, really getting curious, that's actually a very, powerful beginning point. Then, on a daily basis, embracing the idea that if we react, then it's likely to be from the past, unless, as I say, there's a clean emotion which feels very different. But any reactivity, and that can be, as you said, somebody tooting their horn, and you can react by, somebody invading, telling you you're wrong, maybe you think it is. You might react instantly into a defensive stance, or you might go into a I'm wrong, I'm bad position. Just taking notice of that reaction in the body. Somebody shaking their fist at you because you've cut them up at the roundabout or something. If there's a reaction in the body, it could be that you feel like you're a bad girl or bad boy, and it's still the past. Driving the car is an amazing place for it, where people's reactivities come in and not being noticed because someone cuts in front, they get cross. So it is about noticing, and it's about the willingness to know that if there's a reactivity in your body or our body, it is our responsibility to get curious as to maybe that the story is interesting of where it came from the past, but actually we can discover our set of general wounds that we might feel that one of mine was that I was not important, one of mine that was that I was wrong, so therefore I could react to I could react actually to the post arriving in case there was going to be a letter telling me off, which sounds absolutely ridiculous, but there's that, people might recognise that you'll go, oh, I don't want to open the letter because it might tell me off. So those, or I would react to answer phone messages. I worked in the 90s in London, and therefore there was a lot of male clients who would have kind of deep voices and would say, Julia, please could you give me a call, and that reminded me of my father's voice, and I was often told off for my father, so there would be a reactivity in my body. So it's starting to notice that.
Right. Starting to notice that, yeah, I understand. And as you've said, not acting it out.
Yes, because obviously if you get an answer phone message from somebody and think you're in trouble, then you're going to have a different way of answering them and a different way of being in relationship with them in the present than if you clear that and know that that's to do with your past, and that actually in the present, this person, in my case, these people ringing up for help. So if I'd reacted and acted like a little naughty girl, then it wasn't going to do my business much good.
And it doesn't do people any good, does it, to react, whether it's in business or any other relationship?
No, it doesn't. It actually creates the patterns that we were talking about. It means the past is repeated and repeated. It means that we act out our childhood stories in the present, and often with the same results as we had when we were in childhood, and we get hurt and we get disappointed and we get sad and lonely, and things go wrong. But it can be changed.
But it can be changed, absolutely. And I think one of the most significant things that really strikes me is to realise that the reactions are to do with me. They're not to do with anything outside of me.
Yes, that's the most powerful thing, that if we react, it's our responsibility to acknowledge that we have, and to know that we need to release that wound. We need to let it go, and we need to clear it so that we can be fully present with the person we are with.
And that is how we heal past wounds. Julia, thank you very much for your insights there. I really hope they've helped.
Thank you very much.